Hello and welcome to a little bit different replay analysis that we're doing here today. As you can see in the top right, it's a little bit weird because this is pro play, if you were wondering. This is HGC NA, and they have basically brought in Zool into the meta in NA. We've also seen it then copied over to EU, but I think EU was a little bit more like Mimi, meaning they didn't really, in my opinion, draft the strats as a very serious draft. On NA side, it seems that they just found something in scrims that made it work. So HGC is playing here with Zool, Tyrande, Deckard, Vala, and IRL. So they have a very strong solo laner in IRL, and then they have no tank basically. They are playing Zool as a tank instead of like Diablo, instead of Muradin, instead of ETC or something like this. The reasoning behind this is from what I've read online in tweets and other comments, that NA actually thinks that Zool would be a great warrior if he had a little bit more HP. Basically because he has wave clear, he has a hard engage with the roots, and he has somewhat of an escape with his shield. So NA thinks that with two supports you can make Zool just happen as a tank without the buffs that they think he would need to be a solo tank by himself. And the reason for this basically is that the two supports give Zool the ability to just do more in the front line. He can just stay there, soak a little bit more damage, get a little bit more attacked without dying necessarily when the shield is down. So when the bone shield is not there, he still has like two supporters that have his back and help him. And as you can see, his primary job here on Doom of the Spider Queen first is that he just clears the waves. He doesn't do that much else, and it's actually kind of interesting to see that, because a lot of tanks that are not called Muradin or Diablo at the moment struggle a little bit with the wave clearing and the early game power. Even Diablo without the souls can be a little bit weak in the early game because you're not as tanky. So you end up basically having situations like these where the enemy solo laner or I don't know what you want to call it, like maybe assassin who clears the waves, doesn't really matter, but basically you get out cleared very heavily. I mean, for Diablo it's not that bad because he still wants those souls, so if he just tanks them in front of his wall, it's fine. But Zool in this case, as a tank, brings excellent wave clear with it. He doesn't really fit into the solo lane meta because he doesn't have self-sustain in this way that IRL has it, or in this case here, Leoric and other solo laners like Blaze would have. On top of that, Zool, with the bone prison that he has a very, very good engage for your team. So that's something that obviously is what a lot of main tanks have and what make them shine. Like if you look at Diablo, the Diablo combo Q into E is basically what makes him so strong, because he can put an enemy out of position rather quickly and also like disable them very heavily. You basically just ram somebody in the wall and then they're already like controlled, and then you overpower them into something like your team or in a bad position, and you'll see that you just have an easy kill. The same goes a little bit for Zool. The Bone Prism obviously is a point and click CC, but it allows a lot of follow-up. Like, it is very announced, which is why I personally like the hero quite a bit as well. It gives a good animation, like it shows who's going to be rooted and everything, and then you're just like rooted in place. So obviously you can move a little bit while the animation is casting and stuff, but once you're in there for a couple of seconds, or well, for 1 second more precisely, that can just be follow-up. So he also has that trait of the main tank. The only thing that he doesn't really have is a disengage, so he doesn't have like a dwarf jump as Muradin has it, or a power slide that can be used defensively. But if you look at Diablo, for example, he doesn't have that either. He just is very, very tanky, and therefore you can see the follow-up on the Bone Prism. So Diablo is just very, very tanky, meaning he can just walk things off. And similar to that, Zool just uses his bone armor and then walks things off. In this case, you can see he can be controlled and killed, but This can happen to basically any main tank at this time of the game. Obviously, later on, if you're level 10, Zul doesn't have a defensive cooldown. Like, there's no, like, you know, avatar in Muradin form or stone form or something like that. That being said, a lot of the other tanks like Garrosh and Diablo don't necessarily go for very defensive talents. Obviously, Diablo goes for the healing and self-sustain in some cases, but it's not like he can magically just heal himself up if the enemy team is like controlling him or whatever. And the same goes for Muradin. Obviously, if he gets caught in the jump, he has difficulties to get away. So that's something that you just have to keep in mind. Zul doesn't have any thing coming for him in the later stages of the game. Looking at his talents, he goes for a double W on 4 and 7, so Grim Scythe and then Harvest Vitality. This obviously is a little bit of a self-sustain and makes him a little bit more tanky. I personally don't think that you get to hit a lot of enemy heroes with this most of the time, but it's just a nice buff to the ability because you're gonna continue skilling into this when you play him as a tank. And then Grim Scythe obviously is great because you can just use your W more often as you hit more enemies. On top of that, if we just look into Zul's abilities, Cursed Strikes also reduces attack speed. So this is something that people also argue that he basically allows you to play a little bit like Muradin, and you just have to use your Cursed Strikes on like Rainers or other heroes that depend on the auto attack damage. That being said, I personally think it's just more his tankiness. Like, sure, the auto attack speed slow is nice, but realistically you don't want to be in melee range of Rainer for too long if there's no follow-up on it. But again, with the talents chosen, you have pretty low cooldown on things if you hit the minion wave or if you hit a couple of heroes. So it definitely is not bad to focus on it. On top of it, you just saw how little they lost for the first wave, and it's one of the reasons that he actually works pretty well with dual support. As we know, supports don't clear waves very quickly, but Zul actually has amazing wave clear, and he can do double soaking pretty effectively. Obviously, it's not a meta map or whatever, but for a while when Blackheart's Bay was in the Hero League map pool, there was this, well, it was considered cheese basically, but you would leave Zul, or you would pick Zul and then play top mid with Zul, and he just would soak all of the lanes himself. And then you would just like form and push bottom. And Zul has such a good wave clear that you don't need to worry about the two supports having inferior wave clear in this situation. And you can see that in the draft that Team Freedom basically drafted, is that they actually lack quite a bit of wave clear. Diablo is kind of fine, but Whiteman is not very good at wave clearing unless she hits heroes consistently in the wave. And then Reyna's wave clear is pretty negligible as well. He doesn't do a lot. Uther also not a great wave clearer, and the only person that really does clear wave rather quickly is Leoric. So it's a really interesting draft, both drafts basically, and Zul should help out HGC here quite significantly because he can just push in lanes, and Team Freedom has to be very careful about not being overpowered by the minion waves. We also heard, well, I also heard that people like to play the Zul with Uther because he gets armor from the heals. So basically Uther in a second support, or a second healer to be precise, because then Zul's lowish health pool is even buffed by armor. And armor is really good, as you can see with Garrosh, for example, who can drop quite significantly and still be very, very tanky because he gets this armor buff that keeps him alive. Oftentimes, at least. And the cool thing about the Uther Zul thing is that it's very reliable. Like, you just use your Holy Light on the injured Zul, you heal him up a little bit, and then he has armor. So he can go back in and fight and uses Bone Prism. So that can be very powerful. In this game, obviously Tyrande that was the old patch. This is like I think 2 weeks ago or something. So Tyrande was just reworked. Was the first week that she was allowed, I think. She was very, very strong, and then she also gives you the ability to split heal a little bit, so you can choose to heal somebody with Elun's Chosen, for example. So it's not too single target focused, and then the potion of shielding on Deckard also gives Zul a little bit of a boost. I mean, it's not a huge shield, but it helps you to survive the initial burst maybe a little bit better. On 10, the Zul went for Skeletal Mages. I think it's the only talent that's really taken in professional play, which for me is very interesting because I always felt that the Poison Nova is actually pretty good burst. And as they play him as a tank, I personally feel like they missed out on using it as basically a large AoE damage that is rather reliable to get off, but pro players obviously enjoy a lot of the control play and doing a lot of controlled kills and everything where it's like mass CC. So the Skeletal Mages gives that. Again, this is exactly what I mean, like these minion waves here, obviously they were stronger when there was still ammo in the game, but this is very difficult to push out. Like you have to really be on point and have somebody as Leoric here with good wave clear, otherwise you will suffer and lose a lot of structures just to minion waves pushing in. So why does this work with the Zul? Basically, the main reasons I already told you is that there's two supports. It's also a little bit surprising. I mean, it's not as surprising anymore for the NA people because they know about it by now, but it's still something that can, you know, catch you off guard. And then if you look at the way that he's built or building, it's very obvious that it's difficult to walk into him. Like as a Rainer, like if look at this, he was hit by it, and now he's debuffed, and now he can't attack as quickly as he wants. And again, this is what I mean. Like the route is very pronounced. You can find a good target very easily. Obviously here the Deckard also set up the kill, or at least the engage very quickly. But again, it's also a very short cooldown. The Bone Prism only has I think 10 seconds. So you have a lot of opportunities to engage into people, and that's one of the things that in pro play works very well, because you basically get one target and it blows up because of the coordination. So this is something that you just keep in mind, that this is probably more for very coordinated play, let's say like 5-man team league, or I don't know, if you play Heroes Lounge or something. Like I don't think this will be changing the Hero League meta a lot. And then we have Rapid Harvest on 13 here. Gain 5% attack speed for 3 seconds each time Cursed Strike hits an enemy. This is really just also for being more efficient in the wave clearing, but also hits actually quite a bit on enemy heroes. So not surprisingly that he took it. Let's speed this up a little bit. We want to go just see how the game turns out, and then we want to show the EU version of this to show that it's not just a fluke. Like this has been drafted quite a bit now. Again, look, he actually has quite a bit of health. His effective health is at like 3,700. It's not huge, like it's not a huge health pool. But as you can see, the Leoric only has 4,200. Leoric is more considered to be a bruiser, obviously, but it's not like he isn't tanky. Like we've seen Leorics that, you know, can tank quite a bit. So the effective health of Zul is again obviously also higher because he has his bone shield, and then with 2 supports he also has the ability to just like be on the safe side by getting healed, literally. Again, this is also important, like these wave clears before an objective, you can very quickly just create a power spike in your lane because the enemy team doesn't have anything to defend. And that's not as given as it might be. Like even with the good wave clearing assassin, the assassin would sometimes need to be in the front lines to do this clearing. and that can be dangerous because you might be out of position or whatever. With Zul, you know, being considered the tank and getting a lot of attention from his supports, him being in the front lines and doing all these things, it's actually very helpful. The one thing that you might see here is that he actually suffers quite a bit from the damage, from the mana that he's using on his damaging abilities. So that's something that you have to be looking out for if you want to try this out in again, your competitive environment or whatever. Because you basically, I'm going to pause it here to switch over, because you basically end up out of mana without the mana talent on level 4, I want to say. So without, no, it's here, Dragul's Essence on level 7, it's going to be difficult because you just don't get mana back anywhere, and you actually use a lot of mana, like 55 on your Q, 60 on your W, and then 70 on your E. There's a lot of mana then being spent, and then Heroic also costs 80 mana, so the only thing that doesn't cost mana is the Bone Armor, so you can basically spam these out and then still have an escape, kind of. But just be aware of that these guys are really also like pushing the boundaries with the mana that they have. By the way, Backlash is still taken on this. I think I've seen on the other replay as well. This is where it is at the moment. I thought when I first heard about it that they probably go Shackler or Shade, but you've seen it here first. It is Backlash. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to another game which is more on a bigger, larger map like Gaia, so we can see how Zul works there. So here we're now on Volskaya, and you can see that Monkey Menagerie also drafted this specific setup, and you can see again it's Deckard, and now this time it's Uther for the armor. So I wanted to take the second replay as well in. We're not going to go through the whole match, but you will see that this is actually used quite a bit, and I think this was kind of significant. I'm not quite sure if it affected the standings, but it definitely again wasn't just for shits and giggles. That being said, Monkey Menagerie is not a team that performed very well this season, so when they were playing against the team that performs even worse than them, you might not get the most, you know, meta drafts out of it. That being said, again, this is pretty normal now that to see it. I just checked Master League also, masterleague.net. Zul was just picked again this weekend in NA and actually won both of his games. So this is becoming a trend. And this time you'll see it with the armor, and again, this is what it's about, like the 15 armor that he gets here from the heal from Uther. This helps a lot in terms of his survivability, because you basically can stay in the fight longer and you don't have to be worried so much about losing a lot of health. With a smaller health pool, it's important to get your effective health up, and effective health basically means the amount of health that you have outside of your HP, like your pure HP plus whatever else you can do to increase that HP without just getting more life. So armor, shields, maybe even healing increase, something like that. That being said, healing increase means you need to have a heal coming in, so that's not really effective health, but armor and shields basically increase that health. So on Volskaya, Zul actually also has the ability to just like clear waves very quickly, which means that your solo laner on the bottom doesn't really get that much pressure, because you have a lot of vision in these lanes where the waves are cleared, and the rotations of the enemies are also rather clear because they need to clear these waves, otherwise they get again pushed in very heavily. So using him here is actually very interesting to me, because you just create a little bit of a different feel on this map. And again, you see how quickly these waves die. Even with the Gul'dan here, he can't just like stay there and queue his wave very easily, because he always has to be afraid of the Bone Prism. We just want to look into the first team fight, and we don't want to necessarily go through all the replay here, because it's very similar to the Tomb of the Spider Queen game. By the way, normally you want to have Zul on smaller maps. Volskaya is rather big, because of this quick wave clear. On these bigger maps, teams play a little bit differently. The rotations are not as crisp. There's normally not like a proper 4-1 rotation because you have a little bit of difficulty to like go through these areas without getting caught by the team that is clearing the wave more quickly. So on Doom, for example, the Great Wave Features allows you to also do some damage to the buildings very early on, which then empowers your Spider Queen push basically. And again, the hero that is picked with Zul is also a hyper carry basically. The Rainer can very much carry the game on his own with his damage because he does so much of it to everybody. So just keep that in mind. It's also about who you draft Zul with. And as you can see, Roll20 are worried because they can't get level 7 when the monkeys will get level 7. So now they have the issue that they basically can't contest this properly, and now they have to be worried as well because of all the CC that is happening with the Zul. As speed up until after the first read to see just what Zul does. He just now clears things, and as you can see, he can still be ganked. It's not like suddenly there's a super OP hero in the game, so you know, don't just draft him and you really can say like, hey, I'm the tank now. That's not how this works. But here you can see another time how great this CC chain can work. We saw the Zul E, we saw the Deckard E kept following up, and then obviously now they have also the Jet Propulsion from Blaze and the Uther Stun. So this team also has a lot of CC going on, and again with the Bone Prism it's very, very easy to signal one target to be killed. So that's just it. We're gonna go and speed up one more time. I want to see the second fight on the Triglav, just to see if Roll20 can, or has figured out a little bit more how to play against the Zul situation, because I think the way they drafted is relatively smart, with a good wave clear and a tanky frontline that can't be CC'd and just killed. Like Arthas has CC reduction, and then Muradin is just very, very tanky. So you, even with the Bone Prism and like everything else, it's very difficult to just CC these tanks. Again, even more CC with the Tornado. It's, for me, it's a very smart thing, and I'm very happy to see it as well. Like the discovery of this is very fun for me. And again, now this is just like also not very well played by Roll20, but you can see even with this, you can still get kills on the enemy team. So it's not like it's super powerful and you will see it everywhere and the Koreans all play it, but it's definitely a pocket strat that can help you in a couple of situations. And I think this might also be something that can be applied to other heroes if we have anybody who can clear waves as quickly and is a little bit tankier. So if there's a new hero coming at some point, or if somebody's getting reworked, like I don't know, Kerrigan for example, with her rework coming out this week, I've heard like some people say like, oh, she's gonna be in the same spot as the Zul, where she has like quite a bit of health. She doesn't have that much wave clear, but she can also sustain herself with the shields and have more effective health with this basically. So we'll see. Interestingly enough, with all the wave clearing and whatever, both teams are not anywhere near close to 13, which is confusing, because in pro play you normally see that very well, that it's a run or race to 13 for the second phase. And here you go. This is something that obviously is an issue with the Zul. You don't have that meaty frontline that much. The Blaze is pretty good. Unfortunate that they still get the Triglav here for the monkeys. But you can see that you still have to play around a couple of things with these tactics, because you basically end up having two heroes that are not necessarily able to like just stay in the thick of things. Like Meridian and also Arthas are two heroes where it's like, yeah, sure, we can just like stay there and try to soak up as much damage as possible. I think we're good. We've seen enough of Zul and the memes that he has. Again, we are gonna see this more often in HGC NA. I'm interested to see if this is gonna be a big influence on, or will have a big influence on the playoffs in NA. So we'll see if the team that qualifies for BlizzCon will use this as a pocket strat. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to show you the NA situation further in the next couple of weeks, let's put it this way. If we see more Zul or even more exotic drafts, I'm going to keep you up to date on that. And until then, I hope you enjoyed this little Zul meme, and I see you next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye.